Chris Simone, who's waiting.
Oh, hi, Chris. Hi, Chris.
It's the one thing about YouTube. It leaves a point there which people can comment upon before you actually get there. And we're actually live now with Talking Niagara on YouTube, right? Hoping to get it back on Facebook at some point, but I'm not even allowed to create pages right now. Right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I can do 3 things a day because I'm now a Facebook newbie.
Well, so, how come that happened? What did you click on?
What happened is one of these messages that says that basically says urgent, you need to do something or your page will be lost, right?
Yeah.
So it said all the right things. It said Meta at the top, etc., etc. And you think to yourself, well, okay, it looks right. It had Meta logo on the thing. It looked right. And then when I'm starting to do it, I just realized, no, I've been conned. I immediately changed my password and everything. Right. In fact, normally when that happens, I change my password not once, but twice. Right. Because if you change your password once, it's possible they get copied it. Right. So you change the password twice in order to kind of block it. Right. But they had set up an Instagram account in the meanwhile, a fake Instagram account. And it's that Instagram account that caused my account to be banned.
Oh, so they started doing.
Yeah. I put in an appeal, but they don't even recognize, they don't even say. Yeah. So what's up with Facebook and me is that basically, that was what I was saying. I had a notification that looked as if it was Meta, right? That said your page has done something wrong. And when I clicked on the link, then realized I shouldn't have clicked on the link, then basically changed the password on my account. But somehow that system basically set up an Instagram account in the meanwhile.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And that Instagram account is the one that did bad things. All right. So welcome back, Dave. Looking trim, says Chris Simone. Right.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Thanks. Yeah, I did. I lost some weight. A couple inches off my surrounding here. I had to put on old pants when I came back because the ones I took with me were falling off. I don't know, why that was, because I was in Portugal for 3 weeks, and everything in Portugal is a climb. Like, I don't think there's a town I was in. What?
You mean that you're going somewhere, and if you want to go from the hotel to the place, it's uphill all the way, and when you're coming from the place back to the hotel, it's uphill all the way.
Yep, both ways. But there was, I think the only town I was in, Panache, that wasn't like that. That was along the coast, but every other town was like, I mean, you had to climb. Like, it's a very steep. It reminded me actually a lot of Costa Rica when I was in the cloud forest area of Costa Rica. Everything was these towns were really, really steep roads and stuff. And oh, smokes, man.
Yeah.
The last little town I was in before I went back to Lisbon was called Alora. And right at the very top of the hill, they have an old Roman temple. And it's only about 15 minutes walk away, but it's like, 45 degrees, up. Almost. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but part of it, I'm sure there's parts of it that I wondered if it was 45 degrees, it was that steep.
You mean,
But 30 degrees anyway.
Everything's like walking up Murray Hill or Clifton Hill.
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah,
and so I
and
think that's what,
and you turn the corner, and then you've got another hill to climb.
Yeah, and through narrow, winding cobblestone roads, and actually, it's a fascinating place. It is steeped with it has all kinds of churches, and it's got these bizarre old religious art in it. To me, it looked like it was completely bizarre, but I suppose it was steeped in symbolism for the medieval, then Renaissance, then Baroque period people. I mean, some of it was just strange to me, very, very strange. And they had these magnificent churches all over the place, these huge cathedrals, and castles, just about castles everywhere. It was a violent.
Well, actually, the castles are about the only old buildings that really survive, aren't they? Because the walls were about 15 foot thick.
Yeah, well, also the churches, because they were kept up, you know, except maybe in England where Henry VIII knocked a bunch. Well, he knocked down the abbeys, didn't he? But not the. But anyway, these and it speaks of a history of a very violent history of wars but it's Reconquista. They were part of the Reconquista. They were fighting against. So the history is very, very interesting. The people are very nice, usually very helpful, and
a lot of them speak English as well, don't they?
Yeah, the farther away from the city you get, and the older the person you get, the less likely you're going to get a word of English out of them.
Yeah.
But in the city and the young, almost every one of the young have some English, no matter where they are, and in the cities you find a lot of English.
Here's a question for you. When I know it's a long time ago now, you went to the Azores, right? And in the Azores, did you speak to a lot of people there?
Not a whole lot. I once in a while you talk to people, but I was in the marina. That's where I was living in this marina. So I was living on a catamaran for, I don't know, it's about 4 days before we left on that catamaran. And so we did go around the town a bit, and we rented a car and buzzed around the island a bit. Never really talked to anybody for too length of time.
What sort of
everybody is busy though. Like you can't just you just can't wander up to somebody and start talking to them because everybody's got a job.
I know. Yeah, what sort of industry is out there in the Azores?
It looks like a lot of agricultural industry to me. It looks like a huge amount, and possibly fishing too. Although I didn't see too many fishing trawls. They boats. I didn't see too many of them. They have a base there where the military and the Canadian Armed Forces landed there one day, and they were tromping through the marina. I thought, where are you guys coming from? And they had the Italian warship there for a while. So the little port probably plays a kind of an important part, being where it is 1/3 across the Atlantic from Europe.
Yeah, well, it's quite a way out in the Atlantic, isn't it?
It's about 1/3 away across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
From Europe.
These are islands, an island chain that basically would have been set up, I presume, as the Atlantic was widening, as the mid-Atlantic rift was widening, that would have been an island chain which would have been on the European side, and it's still, pushing away from the separation of the plates. So it's.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it's a volcanic creation. I don't know if it's been just left there. Not like Iceland, which is just keeps getting created.
Well, no, Iceland's right smack in the middle of the North Atlantic ridge.
Yeah.
right?
So
The
it
plates
just
that
keeps
are separating.
expanding. Like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so
If you bought,
it's right there and it expands on both sides of that.
yeah, if you,
In a few million years, it's
theoretically,
going to be a big long island, you know, like
yeah.
right
I was
across.
going to say theoretically, if you bought a, a few square miles on either side of the North Atlantic Ridge in Iceland, and you left it to your grandchildren and your great 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 grandchildren, the 50 acres that you bought on either side would suddenly become 5,000 acres and then 5,000 square miles
Mhm.
as it expands, between the between the points.
Well, that's why they think the sea turtles have such a long way to go to lay their eggs because they've been around for 250, 300 million years, at least 250 million years, I guess, longer than the dinosaurs.
Yeah,
And as they evolved, the continents kept spreading and spreading and spreading over millions of years. And where they were originally, it was just a hop, skip, and a jump to go to the beach to lay their eggs. But as the continents drifted, their habitats stayed in the same spot, and their breeding grounds stayed in the same spot, but they kept widening. So over
yeah,
250 million years, they've evolved a way of going all that way back to the breeding
yeah.
beaches. That's fascinating. But in the meantime,
Well, yeah.
it was just 7 days for me to sail from the Azores to Lisbon. So a few days in Lisbon or in Ponta Delgado,
Well, I'm
and
assuming the sailing boat that you were on had GPS and all that kind of stuff.
oh yeah, it had all the safety things. In fact, there was three of us on the boat, and we all had a watch. We all had a watch for like about I think it was like 4 hours, and then the other two had theirs, and
Yeah,
then through the night they shifted the watch to 2 hours. I think it's probably because if you're going to fall asleep by accident, it's going to be during that time.
yeah,
And so if you fall asleep, at least there's only 2 hours where you're not watching. You're not, but you have to keep an eye out on other ships. So they have this little radar things, more or less, by the steering wheel, and you keep your eye on that.
yeah.
But it's all automatic. It's an automatic pilot basically, but you have to keep an eye on that thing. Now I messed that automatic pilot up one time. So the automatic pilot pilots the ship. So you put a direction into it, and it's always fighting the wind or whatever else you've got
Yeah, yeah,
going.
yeah. You're
You know,
tacking.
and,
You're tacking.
yeah.
You're going in this direction, but in order to get there, you're going across paths like that.
No, we didn't do much tacking, but what we did was, of course, you get your sails filled up. What you don't want is you see the wind coming directly from behind you. You think that would be a big thing, but you really want it
No,
on
you
some kind
don't.
of an angle, you know. And we didn't have to tack much at all because of the winds. But sometimes the winds were pretty low, And this automatic thing it gives you a line straight from Ponta Delgado to Lisbon. And it tries to follow that line, but actually what it does, if you look at the trace of the line, it goes like this as it's moving. It kind of always readjusts to get there. And it depends on what kind of winds you get and how it's going to push the boat and currents as well. But the big thing is to look out for freighters in that because they can knock you over. They come up on that screen, little radar screen. And so they're going to be 16 kilometers over there or 15 over there. But sometimes they disappear off the screen. It's an imperfect system. So once you spot that, you got to keep your eyes peeled because they'll disappear off that screen from time to time. And once
I'm guessing that
once we had to call one of the freighters, it was coming kind of close.
Yeah, but the thing is, a lot of that is that those freighters. The good thing about those freighters is they're long. They're big and slow, right?
They're not that slow. They're not that slow. Yeah, they're a lot faster than the catamaran. Now I tell you how I messed that automatic pilot thing up. I have a little portable Go. It's a little computer, but it's got a magnetic strip on it where the keyboard claps onto the screen.
Yeah,
because the screen is a tablet. So but I put it on there and I can type. And so that got, so I, what I did was I in the shelves of in my little room, my cabinet, it was my turn to go to sleep. And so what I did is I took that and I took that and I moved it to one side of the shelf, unknowing that one of the receivers is right behind the wall of that. Oh. So all of a sudden, the boat took a complete left turn and like took off on its own, because it's now and meanwhile there I am lying down. I got no idea what's going on up there, and they're trying to correct stuff, right? Trying to figure it out. And I came back up on my shift, and they says, do you have any kind of motors or anything in your room? I had a CPAP machine. I said, yeah, I think that's messing our and then they told me what happened. I said, I don't know, because that CPAP machine has been in the same place all these days. By then, about 4 days, and nothing's happened. So I went down on my shelf to see what was going on, and I said, this is it right here. It was magnetic, and then they tested it. Yeah, that must have been it.
The magnet.
There you go. That's why you have to have a watch. You have to have a watch on all the time. Somebody watching, or else you might go, of course, for somebody got a magnetic strip on their computer.
Yeah, well, magnets and what do you call it? Magnets and compasses don't work well together.
No, and I still don't know how that really affected the automatic pilot system, but it did briefly anyway.
So, what news from back home did you read?
That I heard the regular hubbub about Kamala Harris. As a matter of fact, I had a big argument in the boat with my two crew members. Well, the guy that owned the boat was my pal, right, and one of the crew members and me. So there's just three of us, right, and I had a big argument with those two. They're both Americans. Well, my buddy's now he's a dual citizen, but the other one was an American. We had a big argument one night, and I said, Biden will not run as president. He will not. He will drop out. I told them this before he dropped out. I says, I saw that debate, and he has got to go. They're not going to let him run. They won't. And they were arguing with me because they were both Democrats, right? And I said, look, the guy's finished. He's done. They cannot win. They got to replace him. And sure enough, they did. So it wasn't a big surprise for me, but I think it was a bit of a surprise for them.
Wow!
I think after a couple of days, I'd managed to convince my buddy that he didn't see the debate, and I says, I saw that debate, man, and he says no one will vote for that guy. I mean, only loyalists.
Well, and of course the question, that has actually brought up good interesting questions about the last few weeks. There's been a lot going on there with everything, right?
Yeah, in Europe, well, of course, I didn't get a whole lot of Canadian news. I got Globe Mail. You get, I mean, pretty much everything was awash with the Olympics for a while there.
Of course,
and so I got the Globe Mail on my phone, so I was able to read up on Canadian stuff. But of course, the big hubbub was Gaza, Ukraine, and all that, and I was surprised how little it was on Gaza. I think
that has not been a lot.
The mainstream media has been told stop talking about it because we're not going to be able to do anything about it. I seriously don't think the Western countries think of Palestinians as real people. They wouldn't let that happen if they did. I mean, that's my personal opinion, but I can't understand why that monstrosity is still going on. It is evil. It is absolute evil. In any case, but that was going on in Portugal. You'll see signs for Palestinian liberation here and there. Just about every town has them, so they're much more in touch with the Palestinians. Here, we pretend they don't exist, or they're just an encumbrance. But over there, they're actually viewed as real people. Yeah.
So when you left, the UK election occurred before you left?
Yes, yeah,
it had, yeah.
I left on the 6th. I landed in the 6th on the 6th.
On the 6th. Okay, okay.
I must have left on the 5th,
so the UK election had just happened by the time you left. And now, you know, I did something yesterday, a couple of days ago, where there's Canadians are giving a travel warning against people going to the United Kingdom because now there's a massive protest in the UK.
Yeah, I didn't read. I saw that, and ostensibly it was about over immigration. I'm not so sure that it was. I think it's just it sounds like a lot of goons getting really mad because of the murders. I think that's what precipitated it, didn't the stabbings?
Yeah.
And of course, So when people get like that, then they kind of assume, oh, it's the bad guys that came off the boats. I don't know who did the stabbings.
I don't think the police even know. I don't think the police even know right now, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't get that. And it's funny how the news is run. Last night, although I didn't watch it, like I was watching PBS News last night, which I'm happy they're not so ultra left as they used to be. I'm glad they're kind of coming back into the middle a bit. But I was watching PBS News and they were talking about no, sorry, it wasn't PBS News. It was I think it was Democracy Now!, which is very left-wing, but pretty good news station. So you just got to realize it's quite left-wing. And they were talking about the Taylor Swift concert person who was going to blow that up, and he was an Islamist. But I never got that. I never got that at all. They just kept talking about this person that was going to blow it up, but they never once said it was Al Qaeda inspired. And I had to read that up separately. So I'm thinking, who is this guy? Is he white? Is he white supremacist? Is he a communist? Is he whatever he is? It turns out that he was an Islamic terrorist being radicalized rather quickly. But they wouldn't even say that. And I think I have to say that I wasn't listening to the whole thing, but as soon as that came up, I couldn't figure out who this person was or persons.
Yeah. And again, then we also had the Trump shooting.
Yeah, that was that is something I had feared for a long time. I told my buddy that too when we heard that. I said to him, that is what I have been afraid of the whole time. If Trump ever
all they did is shot a little bit of blood out of his ear or something.
Well, that bullet could have, if it just moved over half an inch, or well, not half an inch, but a few inches, and it could have torn off the side of his face. It could have killed him easily. He was I've always been afraid, like, even though I don't really agree with Trump at all, I've always been afraid he was going to get shot. I was very afraid that someone was going to shoot him, and they almost did. And I know there was, and I was very relieved that he survived the assassination attempt, despite the fact that I dislike his politics. Because well, for one thing, he's a human being. You don't want him to die like that, and through violence. And the next, what would happen in the United States if the assassination attempt was successful? It would have torn the country apart.
It would have. But then again, I one of the things I read in the last month was actually this person who wrote for the UK Independent, the independent newspaper from the UK, and he was saying, I've always predicted that the American Civil War will start around about 2040, but we might be starting sooner. And literally, a lot of the things he's talking about here, it's like, well, there's a lot in this presidential election. And for one of them, there's an article I sent you today. In the event that former President Donald Trump wins in November, he'd be able to either have his appointed Attorney General dismiss all federal cases against him or issue a presidential pardon to himself.
Yeah, he
Right?
could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're basically saying, well, they're making alarmist statements that, hey, the Senate and House of Representatives needs to do something about that, like now.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Just it's something that that as soon as Trump got in and he became popular and became the president, I have feared for his life.
Well, actually, the funny
thing
that
he's going to be a mark because there is so much frustration around his popularity.
Yeah,
those people who find him popular or follow him are strong supporters of him, but the rest of the people don't understand why they could possibly follow the guy.
Yeah,
and so I don't know. I mean, every politician has to worry about nuts, and I don't know who the kid was who tried to kill Trump.
But he was a Republican. He was a Republican.
Yeah, that I heard that too. Yeah, it's
him.
very, very odd. And the security services screwed up massively. They allowed a high place to be undefended by the security system. I mean, I remember when Trudeau came to town, I was the so-called bodyguard, but actually what we really were just kind of crowd maintenance, right? And so Trudeau came and we're supposed to keep around him, all that kind of thing, and help push through the crowd. But as real security people, we're all up around every high place you could see. They were there everywhere. And you could always tell who they were because back in those days they wore black suits, black tie, and sunglasses.
You're talking about Pierre Trudeau.
Pierre Trudeau,
yeah.
So
not the current one.
Not the current one, no. Back then it was at Skyline Tower. I remember they had officer people everywhere. And back then the plainclothesmen were, you might as well have put a uniform on them. I don't know how many people they had salted into the crowd actually. But back then they were all men in black. They all looked like men in black.
Well, actually,
black,
the one
black,
you can tell
sunglasses, black suit, white tie, black.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that you can actually tell those that are actually the bodyguards, because if you look in the crowd, you can see those that are looking at the crowd, not the individual.
Yeah.
Right. And they're the bodyguards, right?
Well, we were supposed to be as bodyguards. That's what they called us, but we weren't really. We all dressed up in suits. We were supposed to be dressed up in suits, and we did. And all we did was sort of keep the crowd away from him. And I came face to face with him, like when I was kind of putting the crowd away. And there he was, face to face. And I looked at him, and I thought, oh, it's supposed to be. And he smiled at me, and I think, oh my God, I'm supposed to be the crowd guy, so I can't be just looking at him, And I think he wanted to shake my hand, but then I was kind of nervous because I felt that I wasn't doing my job. So I went like this and kind of like made it look like I was doing my job. And kind of like
the interesting thing about the Trump shooting is that typically, as a result of that, Reagan got about an 8-point lead in his at the time when he was shot, right?
Yeah.
He got an 8-point popularity boost, although he couldn't stand again at that point because that was already in his second term, right?
Yeah. But Reagan was a different ball of wax. He wasn't a nutcase. He wasn't an egocentric nutcase. Even the Democrats loved. There was this thing called the Reagan Democrats back then. He was so popular.
Well, Reagan was considered. Reagan. Well, being a Republican in California, he tried to break into the Democrats first of all, right? But Republican in California is unusual anyway.
Well, he was a movie star, of course, and of course he was come from pretty humble means, so it's most likely that he would have started out, and he did. He'd start out as a Democrat, and he worked in the Democrat Party, but there wasn't any room for him. They were full to the brim. They had the Kennedys and other people. There wasn't any room for him, but where there was room was Republican. So that sort of gives you an idea that he really didn't philosophically abide by any particular political philosophy, but he did see a way towards power through the Republican Party. But remember, at this time, he did the born again thing. He became religious. I mean, he wasn't one that spouted it off or anything like that, but he did a religious conversion, like George Bush did, George Bush II. So they had this religious underlaying, and then we were talking about Biden losing his noodle. Reagan was suffering from early Alzheimer's in the last year, at least the last year of his 8-year term. His last 2nd-year term, or the last 4-year term, and he had to be helped quite a bit through that last year. And I think that's pretty much happening to Biden right now. He's need a lot of help.
Well, and of course, Trump was the first one to say, well, if he's standing down as presidential candidate, he should stand down as president. I get the logic of what Trump was saying there, although it's like, don't even mention that. That's not even the place to go. You basically just say, the way to gain popularity there is to say, well, I'm glad he's seen sense and stood down. It was the right thing for him to do. I wish him well for the rest of his term. That would have been the politic way of dealing with that, right?
I'm not so sure. He's dead wrong about stepping down as a candidate, because look at Johnson, President Johnson. He turned down the candidacy of the Democrat Party when he was the incumbent in 1968. He would not stand again. He was entitled to, but he did not, and no one told him to wrap it up and get out. That kind of thing. So no, Donald Trump was completely wrong there. This is a free country. You can do anything you want. If you decide, or United States is and if the president decides he doesn't want to be president after his term is done, that's his decision.
That is his decision to make, and it doesn't affect the election at all. But you see, the interesting thing is about that, and just as I'm not taking any particular side. I've noted that adding Kamala Harris to the ticket, or replacing Biden with Kamala Harris on the ticket, has actually improved the Democrats' chances of winning this election.
Hugely, because now there was so much doubt around Biden that she's young. That's the big difference here. She is young, and her running mate is relatively young. He's 60, she's 58, 59. And Biden, Trump, he's like 78, 79 years old. So he's getting up there. So now they've completely reversed it. They've taken the old guard out and put the new guard in. At first, I wasn't too happy with the choice of Kamala Harris until she started running the campaign. And once she started running the campaign, and once she picked Walz for her running mate, I thought, she really does know what she's doing here. She's picking everything along the lines of percentage. So she's got a white guy, a teacher, natural guardsman, hunter, fisherman, regular dude type Minnesotan.
Well,
very much like a Northern Ontarian guy.
Well, the thing that surprised me in a way is that she picked somebody from Minnesota, because the traditional thing you do if you don't come from the southern states, is you pick a southern state Democrat because you have to pick up those votes somehow.
They don't have to worry about the votes in the southern states because they'll have just about every black vote down there. In the southern states is the highest concentration of
that. Yeah.
In the southern states is still the largest concentration of the black population. So they will be coming out pretty strongly in there. I expect that they'll win. They will now win Arizona and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, to leave Shapiro in Pennsylvania, I think was probably a very good idea. He was the number one pick by the media, from what I could see. I didn't think it was a good idea because of his track record with Israel, and because that would drag her down. But he's very, very popular in Pennsylvania, so he will hold that state for her. He will campaign in that state.
Yeah,
and that's a swing state that has to be had. I think
he has to win. Whoever wins has to win Pennsylvania. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think right at the moment it's Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona that seems to be the key states. This election, the last election, Michigan as well potentially.
Yeah, don't forget Georgia and Arizona. Those are
I said Arizona. Yeah, likely Georgia as well. But although probably, maybe this turns Georgia towards, if what you're saying is correct, it turns Georgia towards the Dems.
Yeah. So there was a whole lot of hand wringing when Biden was in, but now you have a young, dynamic leader. She doesn't stutter, stumble, doesn't make mistakes.
And the irony here is that Trump is doing exactly what Biden was doing, stuttering and stumbling and making a lot of mistakes.
I don't think that's going to make any difference to his core group. I still think he's going to get 40% of the vote. The problem is, I don't think he's going to get much more than that. And that's the real issue here. He's got a solid following. And when it comes to the polls, when they come to vote, he'll get 40% of the popular vote for sure, because he has this loyalty among his firm followers. The rest of it, though, the same reason why he lost against Biden would be the reason why he'll lose against Kamala Harris. But more than that,
I'm not even going to go there. It's too close to call for me.
Well, the way I see it now is all those people who didn't want Trump elected last time and were able to defeat him by just a small amount of votes are going to be there again. This time they have more reason than ever to go to the polls because they have a young, dynamic leader. Plus, I think they're going to sway the majority of the independents towards them. At this particular time, I don't think Trump's going to get much more than that 40%. And of course, but one thing we have to remember here, just like the last time, it's going to be completely fixed. The vote is going to be completely fixed. All the machines are going to be fixed. I mean, the proof.
No. Okay.
Even if Trump wins, they're fixed. Because if Trump doesn't get every single vote, it must have been fixed.
Okay. So I saw this one today and I thought, let me see what the results are. So there's a straw poll out there. And the question was, should Trump be allowed to run for president in 2024? By like a 95% majority, people saying no.
No, yeah. Well,
but clearly that seems to me like a very biased poll.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Trump's legal problems have come too conveniently, and they're being run by the Democrats. Democrat judges and so on. So I think that he's got a good case there that he is being persecuted unjustly, and these things happen to be occurring just around the time of election. So I think he's got a good case for that. But I don't think that's gonna carry much weight in the long run. And I have to say this, Trump, if you were comparing Trump and Biden during this whole campaign, Trump is being in and out of court the stress levels must be incredible because they're after him everywhere, legally here, legally there, everywhere. And then he goes on the campaign trail and he does a fantastic job. And you got to say to yourself, man, what that guy is made out of. How could, like he just was able to compartmentalize this and that. That's the legal problems over there. This is my campaign here. And I got to say, and if Biden was in the same situation, he would be a big mess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so while you were in, obviously there was a lot of use of, there was a lot of American news over in Portugal. But while you were in Portugal, was there any Canadian news? Did anybody say anything about Trudeau?
No, not that I could see. No, normally in the hotel rooms, there's a TV in them, and you got international, like kind of like a cable thing or internet thing, right?
Well, you can watch CNN anywhere, right?
Yeah, so they have they had CNN Portugal, so sometimes I'd watch that, even though I didn't understand the language because I wanted to see what they were focusing on. They had of course they had all their own stuff on CNN Portugal, but they'd also have the American stuff because that's worldwide importance. They'd have coverage of Gaza and they'd have coverage of Ukraine and all that. They had Al Jazeera, which I was thankful for because I think they're a very, very good international news agency. I wouldn't want to trust them on anything that had to do with Qatar or Doha, basically, or that end of the Middle East. But anything else, they're pretty good. There was BBC a lot of times on there. So you had most of the time. I think you could even get Fox on some of them, but who wants to watch that? And then we so I did watch, but most of the time I just let it go. I didn't really. I take my phone out and read the Globe Mail, a few pieces there. I look at the major stories from Reuters or something like that. But most of the time, I kept it in the background. I didn't want to think about it too much while I was tromping around Portugal. I wanted to see Portugal. I didn't want to see my TV screen.
I know, I get that, but I'm only asking from the viewpoint of I'm always fascinated by how other people see us, so to speak.
Well, just about a lot of people know about Canada. They of course, it's like everybody seems to have a relative. If you start talking to them, I was talking to this. I made a buddy of this drunk guy in Miranda del Douro. It's a little wee town in on the Spanish border in northeast Portugal. And of course, he had a sister that was in Toronto and all this and other stuff. Oh, by the way, in that little town, they have their own language called Mirandese. It's a surviving. It's one of those old languages that are survived. There was countless different languages after the Roman Empire collapsed. So there was Leonese, there was Aragonese, there was all kinds of different languages. And one of those survivors of those days was Mirandese. And that is similar to, but not the same as Portuguese, and is spoken in that area. A little bit of tidbit fact for you there.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, probably, as you say, probably very little about Trudeau, probably also very little, even less about Pierre Poilievre.
Almost nothing. At the particular time, there wasn't anything big going. If the trucker protest was going on, it would have probably been all over the news over there.
Yeah, probably.
The European Union was not too pleased with Trudeau's what Trudeau's government did with the truckers, interrupting their money supplies, also calling out the hounds on them. They weren't pleased with that at all. So that would have probably got a lot of press because that was a big deal. But nothing happened in Canada other than fires. I think I saw some stuff about fires in Alberta, around Banff, and I saw some of that on the headlines. I think I even saw something like the royal family being saying something in sympathy with the Albertans about Banff going up.
Well, the fires actually pretty bad out there.
Yeah, they're so that was on the news.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then again, but then again, North American forest fires always seem to make the news, irrespective of where they are.
Well, I had to drive through. There was a forest fire going on in Portugal, and and there was warnings that I may have to get off the road and go a different route.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, it was around a little city called Pombal. A very interesting little place. It has a Templar castle on its highest spot. So and it's a nice little town, and we just happened to go there when there was a town celebration, and but there was a forest fire close to it. So going in and going out of it, we had to be aware of that fire, and we were told or informed. The information out there was you might have to divert depending on which way the fire goes.
But you didn't really get it.
Didn't have to, no. Yeah. Didn't have to. No.
I actually noticed we seem to have these fires though that go on that have hundreds of square miles on them, whereas I've seen forest fires in Britain, and they tend to be like 5 or 6 square miles, and that's it.
Well, of course, they got a lot less forest, don't they? And you get the vast forest areas of northern Canada, and lightning strikes are hitting here and there and everywhere, and then you're going to ignite it, and there is less resources where the fires start normally.
Well, so I think the other thing is there's more city, there's more, there's less rural ground in comparison in England.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, whilst, actually, so it's interesting. Yeah. And it's probably fairly true I sent you a dig about Porto not seeing the stadium, because of course the Portuguese football, football's the current god.
Yeah, well, there must have been a football game going on when I was in Lisbon, because I could hear these cheers from the water. I was in the boat. And I could hear these cheers like distantly away. So it must have been.
There's a stadium. There's a stadium on the water's edge. I do know that in Lisbon. There's about 3 teams in Lisbon, I believe.
Well, they were hooting and hollering. I could tell you, and the huge cheers at a distance. I could hear them.
Yeah,
and I knew it wasn't for the Olympics because because I don't think Portugal is winning too much there. But I don't know, the forest fire. Like I said, they had forest fire there, and I don't know. All in all, it was a very good trip. I would give everybody advice this time. If you're going to go to Portugal, like I was in Portugal for 3 weeks. I was sailing. I was in the Azores and on the mainland, on land for over 3 weeks, and I was sailing for another week. So I would suggest that now the reason why I did take a holiday in Portugal, because I had the opportunity to. My buddy said that I could jump in with him from the Azores on. So I had to buy a ticket and get, so I didn't have any time to make any real plans. And so when I went, I would suggest to everybody, number one, if you're traveling in Portugal, do not go in the summertime. It is brutally hot during the day.
I went there. It was in the autumn. I went there in October. Actually, it was lovely weather. but I went to the South Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the do not go during tourist season, which is the summertime. Although there is a tourist season in the South Coast in the spring, but because one thing, it's brutally hot. Number two, it's hard to get accommodations, and those accommodations are very expensive. Everything goes down in price off season.
Yeah.
So those are the things I would say. And you're tromping around a city like Porto, and I mean, it is steep too. It is like directly up and down almost. If you do that, walking up and down those steep roads, you don't want it to be 35 degrees. You don't.
Yeah.
So that's advice. And like I said before, and if you go there, think twice before you get a car, because if you get a car, you're going to have to find a hotel that has parking. Many of them don't, right? And they don't have parking. So that's a big problem. The trains are very good there. The metro system is excellent. The metro system in Lisbon itself is just fabulous. They've got a subway. They've got good, efficient buses. They've got the bus driver will call your spot for you if you're looking for it. And so they're very, very accommodating to tourists, and they're very, very nice. They don't fawn over you. They don't do anything. But if you need somebody to help you, they will help you.
Yeah, and I actually, as I say, I went to the south coast of Portugal many years ago. Took a car and drove up to Lisbon on a day trip, and that was interesting. Did you see many shanty towns around Lisbon?
No, I did see some. I did see some homeless people, but not nearly as many as we see here. So there was the odd one, and there was a few beggars in front of the churches.
Well, I remember crossing. I was remember driving to a point when I had to cross this bridge, and as I crossed this bridge into Lisbon from the other side, as you come down, you circle around a point, and there's where you circle around, you can see there's kind of walls to parts of houses and that sort of thing, and over the back in an area that probably most people who own those homes would never go anyway, there was like shanty towns there built on the back of houses.
I was all over the place. Like I was in a car and off and got lost a lot of times. I didn't see anything like that.
You didn't see anything like that?
No. And when were you? What were you? When were you there?
I was there. Yeah. I don't know. Sometime in the late 80s.
Yeah. So there you're talking
different
40
era,
years ago, 30, 40 years ago. So so things have changed there. What is happening in Portugal right now is all these wonderful old towns are being rebuilt and being put back together. The old towns, people still live in these old little houses. A lot of them are very thin and high, and they were built centuries ago, a lot of them. And so there's lots of rehabilitation to everything going on in Portugal now. All over the place, they're fixing everything. And one place when I was in, I think it was in Pombal, they were fixing this house, this old house, but they couldn't fix much of it. They could keep the walls. They kept the front wall and the back wall, and everything inside had to be torn out and rebuilt. There was, but they'll save if they can. In Porto, right at the main San Bento, there's a spot there where it's the best spot to get off of the metro subway. There's a building there, and it's built partly out of the wall of the old city. It's just got part of the wall, and so they've done a lot of work, and someone told me, that tipped me off, that was probably EU money that was coming into the place, but it really does. Now, here's something I found out subsequently, though, thanks to Pierre Poilievre, that our housing is the second worst, most expensive in the world, next to Portugal. Portugal is the worst. So I talked to second last day there, just had a conversation with the Uber driver, and he's saying it was too expensive. Like, he was from Bangladesh, and he'd spent some time in Qatar, and now he was in Portugal. But the problem is, like, it's getting too expensive even there for for people. It's very, very expensive. And there is a backlash against tourists all through the Iberian Peninsula. That's another thing. They are blaming the massive amounts of.
I tell you what, I understand that. I do understand that, because the British have been living in Spain for 20, 30 years, and they are absolutely disgusting in Spain. Drunk, drunk, and there's a lot of British criminals live in Spain, because Spain doesn't have did not have a extradition treaty. But there's a lot of disgusting people who go on holiday every year to Spain, and they smash the place up, and the Spanish hate them.
Well, that's not what this is all about, and I can understand that too. But what is happening is what's happening here in Niagara Falls, where a lot of people from outside the area are buying up homes and making them B&Bs or sitting on them for investment. And that's what's happening in Portugal right now. Is the tourist trade is coming in and buying up properties and pushing them up higher, and so people can't buy houses or get rent. It's very, very similar to what's going on here in Niagara Falls, is where outside people have come in and buy stuff. And I saw that even in the little town outside of Humboldt where I was staying, little very rural community. They have all these little farmer houses, and right in the middle of them, they start having these huge homes with Audis and Mercedeses in front of them. Now, all that land around there now costs much more than it ever did.
Yeah.
And and so everyone, like you, I don't know if you heard about the cruise ships could not land in Barcelona because of the protests against the tourist. It's not so much against the tourists, it's against the tourist trade, which are trying to buy up land and properties and stuff like that and convert it over to tourist type of industry, which shoving the price of houses and everything else up. So there is where the protests are. I could see, when I read about it and heard about it, I could see that happening here.
I didn't see anything
more
about
than one time I've gotten,
I didn't see anything about
are you going to
that.
find people? No, you didn't. Oh, it's a big deal over there.
Yeah, didn't see anything.
Big deal over there.
Yeah.
I made a post about it.
Yeah.
And there was the regular cruise ships could not land in Barcelona. And I'd heard about this before, a couple of weeks before that happened, that just about the entire Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain, are having a rejection moment for tourists right now.
Okay. One of the questions. Okay, so we're going to have to leave it at that point, I think.
Oh wow, it's 8:09.
Yeah. I know we didn't start till late, but hey, we can't continue going on forever. All right. So thank you.
Well, I would just say too that it was actually tourism, not tourists. They still like tourists, but they don't like what the tourism industry is doing to their country.
Yeah, and that's probably what that's wrapped up in a lot of what you were saying about these homes taken over by rich people, not from that. When I say immigrants in that regard, I'm saying about people who don't come from that town. The character of the town is changing because all of a sudden some rich person from Lisbon has bought up 30 homes and converted them into one mansion, and changed the character of the town. It's been happening here as well,
Yeah.
right? All right. Anyway.
Yeah, it's exactly very, very similar. Once I started reading about it, I said, my God, that's happening here in Niagara Falls.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And anyway, let's bye, everybody. It's time to go. And Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you adieu.
You'd forgotten it.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Yeah.